Well, good morning and welcome to the third in a series of 4 webinars of the Employer Virtual Training Series. My name's Beth Butler-Fatal, and I'm Executive Director of Disability in North Carolina, and we are so excited to have you with us today. Also with me to join me in this presentation is Pat Kuehl. Pat?
Good morning, everyone. We hope this is going to be exciting content for you today.
Great. And also with us is Barton Cutter. Barton?
Hi, I'm Ron Cutter. I am communication specialist at DIC. I know that at times it might be challenging to understand me, so if you have any trouble, please don't hesitate to ask me to repeat myself.
Great. Thank you so much, Barton. So let's go ahead and get started. For those that are not familiar with Disability in North Carolina, we are a private nonprofit supporting the full state, but our focus is really on that business-to-business network. So we help employers across our state expand their cultures to include people with disabilities. And we do that through their workforce, the supply chain, and the marketplace perspectives. So we are one of 24 affiliates across the country associated with Disability In, our national organization. Disability In is the national nonprofit resource for business disability inclusion, again, across employment and supporting companies in excess of 400 corporations across the country. So we are excited to be, again, an affiliate of Disability In. And our focus is really to provide that collective voice for HR executives, for human resource, human resource leaders, but executives across the broad, diverse industries that are represented across our state, all of which are committed to creating opportunities for employment of people with disabilities. So today's topic is customized integrated employment, a comprehensive overview. And I'm so excited to bring you this content. I think the team has prepared this. I want to give a huge shout out to our self-advocate advisory team that have worked tirelessly over the last 6 months to inform us and give us and share their perspectives on their experiences in employment and in the process of attaining employment, all to inform the information that we're going to share with you today. So again, a huge shout out to our advocate team. Also want to recognize North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities and let them know how much we appreciate the opportunity to do this work through the funding that they provided. So let's get started. When we think about employment first, North Carolina is an employment first state. Executive Order 92 that was issued back in, I think it was 2018, but went into effect in 2019, was really a huge commitment, a statement of commitment on the part of our government and our governor, Cooper, who says that this is really an opportunity for the state government to be a model employer for people with disabilities. Interestingly, more than 1.3 million North Carolinians over the age of 5 have a disability in our state. About 13% of our population here in North Carolina has a disability. Now, the next statistic, which is really why we're having today's conversation, is that 35% of North Carolina citizens that have a disability are employed. And that compares to 76% employment rate among those North Carolina citizens without a disability. So again, we've got work to do. And what Executive Order 92 emphasizes is that as the state government is the largest employer in our state, the commitment there is we need to be a model for the rest of employers that come to do business in North Carolina, but are doing business here today. And that is, we can do better in this space. So that means agencies across the state government are paying attention to the conversation around disability inclusion and how they can create opportunities for employment for people with disabilities throughout their organization. Again, it's also important to remember that there is a disproportionately high level of both unemployment, residential segregation, financial literacy, and poverty among the population of North Carolinians with disabilities. So we've got work to do. And now I'm going to turn it over to Pat, who will talk about the myths. Pat?
Thank you, Beth. And let's remember that it is a myth that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities cannot have jobs. Unfortunately, it's a persistent misconception, and it hinders many qualified individuals from becoming employed because they're told and they buy into the notion that they can't work. However, there is ample research that shows that there are compelling benefits for the businesses when that business has an inclusive workforce. And there are lots of research articles, field-based research that proves that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities can be very effective employees and can have very rich and expanded lives as a result of that. So the truth is that most people with intellectual and developmental disabilities can in fact perform in a competitive position if they receive the necessary training and support to be successful. And I want to point out that all of us need training and support to be effective in our roles, particularly when we enter our first jobs. So this is not something special. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities also need training and support to succeed. So let's take a look again at this notion of competitive work versus sheltered work, and I'm going to turn it over to Barton.
Thank you. So, what do we mean when we talk about competitive work? When we talk about competitive work, we are not talking about workshops or vocational centers. We're also we're talking about environment where people are side by side with people without disabilities who are their peers, not just supervisors. You know, very often in the past, people were written to the environment will take with some minimal. This is also not what we are talking about. we're talking about we are talking about where the wages are completely different. They would be for everyone else. So we are also not talking about in the environment that is again this is about inclusion where people with disabilities are side by side with people that do not have them, regardless of what their role is. This so so remember North Carolina is an at-will state. That means both employers and employees can enter and exit an employment relationship at their own discretion because of this. It's really important to keep job description up to date because as we know, regardless of what role we are in, jobs and needs are created are always evolving and shifting. And this is true for everyone. No, because of our minimum, it often honest dialogue needs to be happening between employee and employer. At a minimum, this needs to happen annually or in the form of an annual review. But very often this is best done on an ongoing basis in informal environments as well. Back to you, Beth.
Great. Thank you, Barton. And so let's talk for a moment about when job termination is warranted, or is it warranted under the ADA? And the answer to that is yes. There are situations and times and circumstances when an individual, an employee can be terminated if they have a disability. That it's not the reason for the termination, understand that. But I think so often employers who are exploring the opportunities, who hire an individual with a disability think, well, what happens if it doesn't work out? And again, you will hear us say this time and time again. You hire one person with a disability, you've hired one person with a disability. Each individual is unique. The accommodations that are required are unique, and the circumstances surrounding their employment and their performance are unique to that individual. So understanding that helps to ensure that, again, you manage that employee with a disability the same way you would any other individual. When again, when a termination is not related to their disability, um, perhaps you hire someone, you go through the accommodation process, you have accommodations in place, reasonable accommodations in place, and the individual has difficulty in performance of that job, unrelated to their disability and unrelated to the accommodations that are being provided. Performance standards must be met. And if that individual is not meeting the standards of your performance, and you follow the same progressive discipline policy that you follow with every other employee that works for you, then absolutely termination may be the outcome. So that's an important piece for you to understand. Again, the key here is that you are following your policies, that you're following the progressive discipline or performance standards that are set in place for you and your company. And then, following those consistently. And that's important to always be consistent. If the employee poses a direct threat to the health and safety of themselves or to others in the workplace, then absolutely, again, in certain circumstances, after thorough review by your HR and other teams, making sure that those decisions to terminate employment are warranted. So Pat, I'm going to turn it back over to you to talk to us about job coaches as an accommodation.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. So can a job coach be a type of reasonable accommodation? Why, yes. In fact, the ADA makes reference to job coaching as a specific reasonable accommodation. It can benefit the employee with intellectual and developmental disabilities in a number of ways, such as assisting that employee to learn their job duties. The job coach can also work with the employer to create strategies for organizing and completing tasks. And then finally, the job coach can assist with helping the employee with intellectual and developmental disabilities to acclimate to the work environment, to the workplace. That said, I do want to stress that job coaches, when they're doing their work at highest efficiency, they're working in tandem with and in a consulting relationship with the employer. They do not stand in for the employer's training. They supplement and support and expand on that training. Individuals who may need a job coach may qualify for this as a service paid for by North Carolina Developmental Vocational Rehabilitation or by one of the mental health developmental disabilities agencies. And so that funding could be provided for that individual to receive that service at no cost to them and at no cost to the employer. And the EEOC has stated that an employer may be required to allow a job coach paid for by a public or private agency to accompany the employee at the job site if in fact that is deemed a reasonable accommodation. And so now let's talk about job coaches and supported employment. And this will dovetail us into the conversation around customized employment. So who are job coaches? They are professionals that specialize in assisting individuals with disabilities to learn and accurately carry out their job duties. So job coaches usually have expertise in working with individuals with various types of disabilities. They also have some training and understanding of the needs of employers because they straddle and serve both audiences. Job coaches can help the employer to design one-on-one training that's tailored to the needs of that new employee. They would typically start out by conducting a job analysis so that they would identify the job duties, taking that essential functions and the job description as their pattern, and then breaking it down even further to make sure that the training can be done in very discrete chunks and the individual can master each of those chunks as they move along. So this forms a training plan that the job coach would share with the employer in a consulting relationship, and demonstrate for that employer and that manager of that individual how they accomplish these training events with the individual. Job coaching involves an application of evidence-based training practices, and it is called supported employment. And there's a long history of the effectiveness of supported employment. If you look up the research on this, it goes back to the mid-70s. So job coaches can also sit down with employers and explore any unmet business needs. And in that role, they can work with the employer to customize or redesign work tasks to benefit both sides of the equation. So now we'll move on to our conversation around customized employment. So what is customized integrated employment? So customized employment means it is competitive work that's done for a typical employer in the community, but it is designed to support the needs of an individual who may have a significant disability. And in this case, we're talking about individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. First, customized employment has to meet the business needs of the employer. This is not charity. We are not asking businesses to take on employees that they A, don't need, and B, don't benefit their business enterprise. But many times an employer in meeting with and working with a job coach can discover that there may be some ways to redesign some of the aspects of a particular role in their company and make it even more beneficial to them in terms of meeting a business need. The other thing that customized employment has to do, it's got to be based on the talent, strengths, needs, and interests of the person with significant disability who is applying for the job that may be designed around them. That said, the important element here is that we are not talking about matching people who have no interest in working in that particular area, have no strengths, no abilities, and no passions for that particular job. It's designed to be a match such that the specific individual's skills, abilities, and interests mesh beautifully with the things that employer offers and the work environment where that work goes on. And diving a little deeper, we're looking at the federal definition here of customized employment. It does involve an initial job exploration by the individual and the job coach, so that together the job coach and the individual with intellectual and developmental disabilities discover what their strengths, capabilities, and skills are. This is often done through an interviewing process or a process where the job coach explores different activities that the individual is proficient at. And then once they have a good understanding of that person's strengths and abilities, that's when the connection with the employers take place, so that the job coach can sit down with the employer and say, let's take a look at your job description. What does it include that may meet the needs of this individual, and what might we tailor to actually maybe of even greater benefit to you? So a set of job duties results from that. A work schedule and work arrangement is done as a result of those conversations. And finally, these supports are provided at the job location. So it's very much a working in tandem as a consultant with the employer and making sure that the employer can carry on the supervision of this individual in the same way they would with any other individual that they hire. And so what are those basics of customized employment? First, it's flexible. So it does involve looking at the job description in a flexible way and in a way that meets the needs of both the employer and the employee, the new employee. It's based on an individualized match based on those strengths and abilities of the job candidate and the identified business needs of the employer. And customized employment is a one person at a time kind of service. So the job coach is meeting with one employer at a time and very, very much tailoring and working to meet the needs of both sides of that equation in a very discreet and detailed way. So Barton, I'm going to turn it to you so you can tell us some examples of customized employment.
Thank you. So, when we talk about contract reform, there are a couple very easy approaches that some ways that customization might begin. So the first is has reassignment where specific job duties within a role that don't fit the person's needs are passed out to other employees that have been loyal and can pick up those tasks. This allows the new employee to focus their time and talent on those aspects which they already feel as this is a burn all the way around because very often it will improve the productivity for everyone. Now, if you could go further with this effect and build or create a job from, from the ground up for an individual with various tests that fit the person's needs can be reassigned to them to fill enough time to make a complete role from that. This often results in a new job description. Another option is job sharing, where more than one person shares the same role. Now, this can happen in a couple different ways. It might happen based on talent and skills, such as the way it happens in job reassignment, but it can also happen based on time. So your employees might be doing the exact same thing, but the role is divided in half to pay out that time. Of course, And one of the other options for customer employment is self-employment. But that's likely less relevant here because you guys are all employers. So um let's start. It's okay. Turn it back to you.
Thank you, Barton. So we're going to offer you some examples of customized employment. One is in a large veterinary clinic. The job coach discovers that they have a need for additional dog walkers to come in. And because she is supporting an individual with intellectual and developmental disabilities who has a keen interest in and is very proficient in working with animals, this becomes a great part-time job for her. And it's a great win-win for the clinic and for this individual because both get their needs met. Another example is one that I actually witnessed here in Charlotte, was that an individual with intellectual and developmental disability of Down syndrome was originally hired by a small bank here. Believe it or not, there are some small banks in Charlotte. They're not all big. To manage the break room. However, after they found out how effective he was and how friendly he was and how well he got his work done, they met with him and he expressed the interest in learning to do some of the spreadsheet work. And so lo and behold, they gave him some tasks to do, populating some spreadsheets and distributing mail and working more directly with his coworkers. And as a result of that, he formed some deep friendships there. And in fact, just about every Saturday, him and the folks from his office go out on the golf course and play golf together. So it turned out to be a great win-win for the bank as well as for this individual. Next, we're going to hear from an individual who also is a person that I knew and assisted. And he is a success story around customized employment. The role that he performs for this retirement community is that of a feeding assistant. They did not have paid feeding assistants prior to him coming on the scene and the job coach working with him. He gets to do his job as a part-time job because that's what he prefers. He happens to have a brain injury, and so he's at his peak performance in the early evening. So his work hours are 4 in the afternoon to 7 p.m. And he has moved out from living with his parents to having his own apartment where he can walk to work. So let's hear from Andrew.
Slide 18.
Well, I was looking for a job, and some helpful folks were able to locate this job for me, and I was able to go through a training and a orientation, and they showed me little slideshow videos and PowerPoint presentations, and they were all able to describe to me what I would be doing, and that kind of helped me out with what I'm supposed to do. Well, I work with the elderly, and what I do is I go around and refill the water pitchers for everyone, and then I come and deliver them back. It's a very beneficial job and very nice service for them. And then I go help some certain residents with feeding them with dinner, and they always say they appreciate it, and it's very good, and they like my helpfulness. So I've definitely achieved socializing, and I've also been able to come out of my shell and be more social and not be afraid to speak up for myself. So it's been a very helpful job for me.
Slide 19. Choosing a job
Andrew,
coach.
working on this since 2017. Beth, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thanks, Pat. So it's really important for us to spend a little bit of time when talking about the do's and don'ts of choosing a job coach. So again, from an employer perspective, I think it's really important to understand, and we've talked a lot about the benefits of a job coach and what they can offer in terms of an accommodation to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But from an employer perspective, you need to be really aware that it's important for you to have an expectation around the relationship with this job coach. So again, you want to know the agency or organization that specializes in supported and customized employment. So not unlike any other consultant that you would invite into your organization, you want to spend some time in understanding the services that are offered and the reputation of those agencies that you're doing business with. You want to understand that their role is a business consultant, not, again, unlike other consultants that you invite into your organization. So when we think about the insurance and the risk mitigation associated with different liability insurances, all of those questions should be asked so that you're clear on what that role is. And the other piece of this is understanding what your role is, and that is when you have a job coach on your as part of your work and supporting an employee that is working for you, that doesn't eliminate your responsibility to engage with that employee. I think when I think about opportunities that I've had to work with job coaches, again, there are some that are incredibly beneficial and they are there to support the employee, but you are still, as the employer, the manager, the supervisor of that individual. And so it's important for you to stay engaged and not use that job coach as a means to solely communicate through that job coach. So keeping that in mind is really important. And finally, being willing to enter a MOU or with the employer when asked to choose to do so. I think that, again, this is a relationship, and so it's important for the job coach to understand their role and responsibility, as well as understanding what your role as the employer is in that maintaining that relationship with that job coach or that customized employment agency. Things to watch out for, right? Leaving the job coach to do all the training, as I said, communicating with your employee. No, they shouldn't be a barrier and or the only line of communication between you and your employee. You need to play an active role in that relationship, just like you would with any other employee. Yes, commit to a job description that it does not meet your business needs. Of course not. This is where, and Pat spent a lot of time on this. This is really a value for employers, and that is to sit down and explore your pain points. Identify positions that may be solutions to your workplace pain points, right? High turnover positions potentially. Maybe just really peak times. If it's a customer-based company, where is it that things are just get out of control, right? Where if you had additional staff or you had someone performing certain tasks, that it would help your efficiency and your level of customer service improve. Those are the types of conversations that you can have with a job coach. And that's that consulting role. And that is where you find a win-win for everyone, because you're meeting that business need, but you're also creating opportunities for employment for people. And again, failure to call on a job coach when things are not going well, and or there's a change in the job, and that happens. Individuals go to work for an employer and job roles change, the position changes, and life happens, which means that it could be that there was a crisis outside of work that the employer is not aware of, but that the individual has been impacted by that. So inviting that job coach back in to provide additional supports or to retrain is always an option. And again, that's the value of bringing in a job coach, and the whole supported employment model is that it's not a one and done. This is a relationship that continues to be there and provide support for both you as the employer and the employee.
Slide 20, Kimberly's job training experience.
And now let's hear from Kimberly, and she's going to share some of her experiences related to job training.
Slide 20, Kimberly's job training experience. Slide 20, Kimberly's job training experience.
Where they are very communicative with me as well as I am with them. When it comes to me learning things, they role play with me so that it can stick with me and that I know that I'm doing this is the correct way that they want me to do my job. They're very patient with me, and without them, I wouldn't be the person I am today.
Okay.
And for me to be
Slide 21, inclusive training practices for
And now I'm going to
customized
turn it over
employment.
to Barton, who's going to talk to us about inclusive training practices and customized employment. Barton?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, yeah, for the employer, there are some really key elements for employing in terms of training practices. So, the first is that the employer, the project manager, have to be engaged. They have to be engaged with the employee because that's the relationship that they've committed to. It's important to apply the same standard policies for the employee. That's in your customer situation. They would apply to everyone else. And it's important that the job coach be present in those trainings so that they also understand what those standard policies are, because that will help them train the person on those standards. You want it's just the employee to participate in the training, and you offer everyone else again this might mean putting it in the job coach to support them as they're going through that training. You then, of course, want to leverage the job coach for them by asking them for a performance evaluation of the person. If they can provide you solid data on the individual performance, performance comes off. So you'll be comfortable in asking for that and call them on it. If it's not them, and of course, the biology is communicate, communicate, communicate both with your employee training and with the job coach. That is there to support them. And with that, I will pass it back to Beth to bring us home.
Thank you, Barton.
Slide 22 questions.
So as we wrap up, here are just some questions to consider. And we'd ask that you just provide just some thought around this. Customized integrated employment. What have you learned based on today's conversations? And how could you leverage a job coach at your company? Things to think about. Now, if you represent an agency here today, I hope that you've been prompted to think about ways to engage with employers, maybe even more proactively as you explore solving for their business needs and how the individuals that you work with on a day in and day out basis can satisfy those unmet business needs. And then finally, identifying your success stories so that you have your own stories to tell about successful employment outcomes among people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Slide 23 Disability Inclusion and Employer Training Topics.
And with that, I want to invite you to join us for our next webinar on August 31st, providing reasonable accommodations, where we'll take a deep dive into that topic and share with you some ideas around creating reasonable accommodations and what that looks like in the area of IDD.
Slide 24 Are you in?
So thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I want to thank Pat and Barton. And if you'd like more information, please check us out at di-nc.org, or you can email me directly at beth@di-nc.org.
Slide 25 Visit us at DINC.
So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Stop recording.